More questions, maybe, from our illustrious listeners.
More questions, and hopefully it means more answers. Today's February 27th, the year 2024. Welcome aboard, everybody. Listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 752.
Yeah, the more I'm in this sport, the more I realize there's really no answers.
God, ain't that the truth? God, I feel like I'm in search for some kind of answer every single day, regardless of anything. But the problem is there's way too much out there, and I think all you end up doing is reading other people's solutions for themselves, and then you try to copy and paste it to yourself when you should really just be like trying to outsource 7 to 10 different types of answers and then figuring out what works best for you in that. But I think a lot of people just that takes an extra layer of thinking, which again, like if you're in the sport, one of the things you don't want to have to do extra of is think, right? And put more effort into creating your own training plan or figuring out when to work out, when not to work out, how hard to go, how easy to go, what to eat, what to drink, when to eat it, when to drink it, how many calories, how much sodium, what about sweat loss, what kind of, what bike do I need, what kind of aero wheels do I need, what about tires, how wide are the tires, what PSI should I run, what's the weather going to be like in Texas in April, do I need a wetsuit, should I go sleeveless, should I not go sleeveless, and if I do get a wetsuit, what's the best kind, if it's going to be real cold, do I need booties, do I need a hat, on the run, should I wear a few belts, should I go with what's on course, should I take my own nutrition, it goes on and on. I mean, the list of questions you could have for like each race is just insane. And then I think everyone's training life is different, right? Your life is different. My life is different. So for me, I mean, you and I are perfect examples, right? Our training life and tendencies are polar opposite based on, life demands and what we like and dislike. So it would make zero sense and be totally unsustainable for me to try and copy your approach, just like it would be insane for me to try and copy your approach. But I think there's huge benefits in just kind of taking bits and pieces from other people's training that you might like, that resonates with you, and taking it along with you. Because I think, to me, like that's how you make something stick, right? If it doesn't resonate with you personally, you're going to give up on it, or you're not going to believe in it, and you're not going to want to stand by it for the amount of time it takes to be really good at something, which is not days and weeks but months.
Yeah I think you do have to figure it out. This weekend we had a little wellness camp up here at the house, and one of the things I think people took away from it is that it's good to kind of settle down and be quiet and listen to what your body and mind are telling you. We can kind of get caught in the hamster wheel of training and everything like that, but sometimes you got to find really what's right for you. And instead of plowing into the same wall day after day after day, and I don't know, it's just real interesting because there's a lot of options in a training and, techniques and theories and all that kind of stuff, but you really almost have to figure it out on your own. And that's sort of like the process I like to go through with my athletes, is try to figure that out. What is kind of their sweet spot, because like you said, man, there's so many variables and in people's lives and training techniques. I got people who like to go after it hard all the time, and others that are just looking for maybe like that minimum effective dose all the time, so a lot of different solutions. I think. I don't think I think that's the main takeaway before we hop into questions, is before we get launched into a whole new topic and totally ditch the rest of the questions that we promised we'd get to, is that I think there's 20 different solutions for probably each athlete, and that might seem like way too many, right? Well, don't tell me that, there's way too many to pick from. But you take those 20 solutions, right, or 20 types of solutions on how to program your week, how many swims, how many bikes, how many runs, when to strength training, if you don't even have time to strength train, what to focus on, how long to go, how short to go, when should I do intensity, when should I not, how long does my longest ride need to be, how long does, my longest run need to be, and then just take 5% from all 20 and come up with your own 100% of what makes the most sense to you. Because again, like I think that's, if you believe in it and you trust it and you feel like it exemplifies you, then you're way more likely to stick to it, right? And to believe in it, that it's working because it's your own, versus, at the first sign of things not going your way, you're gonna think, it's just not for me, right? And that's just not the case. A lot of times it might not be for you, right? But it might be for you. Just looked at it in a different way and you wanted it to be, it's just hard to stick to someone else's
training plan or needs. Like I was having a conversation. I promise we're going to get into Q&As here in a second. But I was having a conversation with one of our newer coaches about a certain athlete and their needs and their race experience. And I was like, listen, this person's needs are totally different than what most athletes needs for, in preparation. You're looking for X, Y, and Z, and you just got to be willing to be creative. And that's something I've taken from you the last few years, being a little more relaxed in areas and being a little more creative in certain areas and just trying to make something that fits. Because again, if it fits and you love it and you like it and it makes sense to you, then you're going to stick with it and you're going to do it. Because you could formulate and copy and paste the most extravagant training plan from Triathlete magazine or download it online, 20 weeks. But if you look at it, you're like, I just don't get it. Like this seems like a far reach. To me, you're already behind the 8 ball and you're already 1 foot out the door versus 2 feet all the way in, which is, again, training is about consistency and availability. And if you're not bought in, then to me, you're already checked out.
Yeah, and it's got to feel right. You got to feel good. This morning I woke up and I'm like, I think I'm going to go for a run. Or I was thinking that last night and I felt this morning, I'm like, I didn't feel like going for a run this morning, but I did feel like getting on my treadmill and doing my incline walk. And then that spurred the whole thing into action, I always talk about transitions, in life and in the morning and whatever. And I just think that's huge. Figure out something you want to do. And then that just sort of like catapults you into the next phase too. I don't know. It's a interesting topic, I think, because
look at you with the news, the newsy type tease for our first question.
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize I was doing. That's how good I am with that stuff.
You're a natural.
Yeah, I'm not proud of that necessarily.
Shake it off. Yeah, I was gonna say, is this something you're proud of or not proud of? First question from Corey. Transition tips and tricks. Pee or don't pee. Socks or no socks. Shoes on bike. Stop at special needs or be self-contained. Doesn't matter. Listen, I used to say it never mattered. And I still think for most of us, it rarely doesn't, right? It really shouldn't matter. Having said that, I do know, I do tell our athletes all the time, I remember specifically an athlete in the Des Moines, I think got second or third in their age group in their first 70.3. And I remember after the race, I was like, hey, great job. But what the fuck were you doing in transition? Mm-hmm. I mean, they were in there for what seemed like 10 minutes. So my general rule of thumb is whatever it is you feel like you need to do, because everyone's different. Whether you want, put socks on, not socks, arm warmers, not arm warmers, Vaseline, extra chamois cream, body glide, goo. You got to stop for a pee, sunscreen everywhere. Whatever you need to do, just don't piddle and don't take forever. That's my biggest pet peeve. And I do say, the older the athletes get, you got to at least extend, I think, for every age group over 50, you add an extra 30 seconds of transition time. So by the time I get to the 70, you should expect a full 6-minute transition. I'm not sure what's going on in there, but the older you get, the longer things seem to take to do pretty much anything. So my number one piece of advice is be quick, because, going back to, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago, we had a friend of ours did Ironman Chattanooga and missed out on his Kona slot by 1 slot, and he had a faster swim, bike, and run time than the person in front of him who got the slot. But he was so much slower in transitions that the other guy got the slot. So again, that's the extreme version, but I do think it's a good lesson. Whatever your flavor is, figure out a way to do it quickly, right? Make sure you got what you need. I don't think there are any tips and tricks. I think the biggest one people, debate on is, shoes on their bike or not. To me, I've never done a race where I've had my shoes on the bike. Am I losing a few seconds? Maybe, but I can still run pretty fast up to the line with my shoes in. And plus, you watch people try to get into their shoes on their bike, and most oftentimes you see fantastic YouTube reels of bloopers of people crashing into the the barriers, swerving left, swerving right, crashing, going up and over the handlebars. I mean, you probably got 2 hours worth of coverage.
I know. I gotta find
from a lot of races of watching just epic disasters. And to me, it's not worth it unless you got down to a science. But still, there's still some professionals. If you watched Kona and Nice last year, I think I saw at least 1 or 2 professionals who didn't have their shoes clipped down on the bike. They put them on in transition. So whatever it is, find your own solution, find your own groove, whether it's, and find your own like organizational kind of like transition checklist. Like I always put my helmet on top of my run shoes, my socks inside my run shoes. I don't wear socks on the bike, so I have my helmet. I have my sunglasses in my helmet, so I go sunglasses, helmet, click. Then underneath my helmet is my shoes. Shoes on, gone. And then when I get back, I can just toss them to the side. Then I got my socks already opened up, ready to go in my shoes. Socks, shoe. And then I grab my race belt and my visor or hat with my hand and put those on while I'm running. That's my biggest tip, I guess, / trick. It's not required to put on your hat and put on your race belt while you're standing still. If you can move and do it, move and do it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, I always put a lot of my, if I'm carrying things on the run, I'll put them in a Ziploc and run out with the bag and then just kind of slowly stuff my pockets as I go. But, I think about transition. I think transitions become this sort of, you're out of the water, you run up to change at your bike, and then you run your bike out, and then you jump on it, and that's the whole transition. But I think transitions take 5 to 10 miles into the bike, or even 2 or 3 miles into the run. That's how I think about them. Because if you do a 6 or 7 hour bike ride up at Wisconsin, you get off that thing, and you're not a runner yet. I mean, your muscles are like, what the hell? So you go through these, transitional phases with your body. My buddy was up here this weekend. He's going to do his first 70.3, and I'm starting to teach him everything about it. And he did his first experimental off the bike run, and he was, talking about the legs and how weird it felt. It was his first time he ever did it, and if you can think back to that, we all had that feeling. But so I think about it in terms of, you don't want to like be slow in there, but you do want to kind of gather yourself and catch your breath and, especially at a full or a half, even, if it's your first or you're not going for the podium and that sort of thing. I think you can have a better race if you think about it in terms of, all right, I'm coming in off the bike and that's sort of part of my transitional phase. And then I get in and I change my shit and everything, but my legs and my body is still transitioning for a mile or two on the run, just to think of it in that term where you got to give your body a chance to set up and be ready to run. And I'm saying that, but I don't do it. That's the thing, right?
But, I mean, that's everyone. But I think what you said is like, it can't be overstated in terms of like, especially, I think both transitions, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, for me, in terms of like how long it takes you to really transition, like my legs getting on the bike, my legs feel like, I mean, every race I start, I'm reminded of two things. One, the first 200 meters of the swim, I think to myself, how am I going to make it 1.2 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Like all your blood's rushing up to the top of your body. It's burning. You're like, my arm fitness is gone. This is gonna be the longest day ever. Same thing with the bike, right? You get out of the water and you're running to your bike. You're like, my legs are rocks. I'm done, right? And then the first, 10 to 15 minutes of the bike, your heart rate's super high, right? Because it's high in swimming. Then you run, you go from being horizontal to being vertical, and then back up and down if you're an aero or road bike. It just takes a while. To me, it's like whatever you can do, again, while moving is great. I'm a huge fan of one of the first lessons I got when I was racing, and the first coach I ever had forever ago, like 13 years ago. The two best tricks that they taught me were the now famous C26 garbage plastic bag trick, which is to keep your core warm. The other one was to take a quick gel in T1 to get ahead of it, just to get ahead of things, don't have to worry about it on the bike. But even then, the first 10 miles or 30 minutes, whatever you want to look at, of your bike, to me is all about setting your gut up for the whole rest of the day.
Right.
Because a lot of people, you're totally empty, right? You probably ate earlier the night before. You got up, you probably had some food, but you probably didn't. You probably already, went to the porta potty 3 times, right? You're probably nervous. You're not taking a lot. And then something a lot of people don't think about is you go and you swim, and if you're well trained and you swam a ton and you know how to pace yourself, then you're zone 2 in it. and it's not that bad. And you get on the bike, but still, you get on the bike from doing an easy swim, right, in transition, and you've got a nice settled belly, right, and a settled gut, but it's still fairly empty, right? So I like to go heavy on the water to start to give myself a little bit of base, because it's like, to me, not having that base in your gut of water to like help saturate and absorb things, it's kind of like having, over easy eggs, orange juice, and coffee right when you wake up in the morning, and then going for a run. Disaster, right? You're gonna be doing a quick U-turn after like mile 1, and it's not gonna go very well. And it's even more important, I think, as you're transitioning. Like if you're a swimmer who probably over swims, everyone knows how much harder it is to take in calories when you are putting forth a lot of energy, and when you're in your stomach, because it's a lot harder to take in fluids, right? If I said, Mike, go out and run 20 miles easy, you could take in a ton of calories and you could take them in whenever you wanted to. Versus if I said, Mike, I want you to try to take in 200 calories over an all-out 5K. You'd be like, I can't do that. I'd have to stop and walk. So for athletes who swim, like probably over swim or going to some undertrain, you're swimming zone 3, maybe even zone 4 for an hour and 10, hour and 40, hour and 50 minutes. So you've swam for an hour and 50 at a high rate of perceived exertion. And you probably haven't eaten that much the 2 hours before, and then you came into it not having eaten the whole night before. You're so far behind, it's not even funny. So your name of the game is to, again, I wouldn't call it catching up, because it's kind of hard to play catch up in that area, but it would be to like, let me see if I can set a base for the rest of my day. So I think it's a great point to like consider transition, not just the space within where your bikes are, but the first 10 miles of the bike and the first 5 miles of the run. Transition and transitioning into the next one, and what you do and the things you don't do, I think really do like set you up for like, your point, I think last podcast about walking some of the first, I think wasn't that Will Emery who you're talking about, who was like the won the overall, Ironman. This is way back in the day, right? What 13, 14 years. One of our friends in Nashville, he would go out, he would win the overall age group and beat pros, and he'd walk a lot of the first mile of the marathon.
No, I don't know if
what?
it was him. There was a guy I knew that would walk a lot, but he's an older guy. But Emery, the story with him was always, well, Louisville was a relative flat course, and I just remember his first 3 miles were 9:30s, and then his next 23 were 7:30s. That's what I remember about him.
Yeah, unbelievable. So same thing, but probably more on a faster level. But it is. I think it's just a great point. You got the transition. You got transitioning into the next discipline.
Yeah. I'd be interested, because a lot of, we see a lot of pros, but they come out gangbusters, but I still think that they're under control. Yeah, it's just very difficult. I know many times I've come out of the water just sucking gas, man, just, way up there in heart rate. And I get on that bike and I just continue it, but it takes me about 5 to 10 miles, and finally my heart rate's under control. But I think a lot of times the courses tend to seem like, a lot of them anyway, the first 5 to 10 miles are good times to get some speed, And yeah, I think that's kind of a dangerous place for a lot of us.
It is, but I think like psychologically, right? If you start off a little bit slow, make sure you've got, again, like, and it depends on how you feel coming out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
If you come out of the water and you see people, I've spectated so many races and see people come out and I'm like, yeah, their day's done. Their day's, yeah, totally. Beat red in the face, breathing so heavy you thought they would do like 100-yard sprint. Eyes are bloodshot. You're like, you're toast. You have 13 more hours of work. How could you possibly come back from this? And so, but on like the first, like, a little bit of the same thing for the run, right? If you start off slow enough to make sure you're getting in fuel again, because lower perceived exertion, lower heart rate, lower energy allows you to take in more, then instead of seeing your pace get slower or your miles per hour drop, you get to see it increase. Right. But I do agree. Like, some of that's very difficult depending on, like, I think you're probably thinking about Wisconsin, right? It's like, it's hard. You really don't want to give away speed on the stick, right? Because you feel like you're getting almost free speed, right? Because what you're about to do is going to be that much harder. But yeah, so you got to be conscious of like what to give up. But then again, hilly courses, take in more nutrition, on the uphills versus not having to worry about the downhills. But yeah, I think looking at transition as a more of a period of time and not necessarily a location would probably serve a lot of athletes really well.
Yeah, I agree.
Heather House, what do you suggest if an athlete misses a zone 2 workout? Skip it and move on, try to squeeze in another day, or is it always a case by case call? Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it's always a case by case call. If you can fit it in and you got the time for it, then sneak it in, and it should be complimentary, right? As long as you're doing it in the spirit of what's supposed to be done, you're keeping it in zone 2, it should be fine. It maybe cut it down a little bit more, but it really is a case by case basis. If anything, what I would say, if it's the zone 2 workout you miss is longer than the intensity workout of the next day, then you scrap the intensity and do the zone 2. Or you could do a little bit of the same, a little hybrid, right? You could take the main set of the interval session, right, and do like a 10-minute warm up, bang out the interval session, and then ride super easy the rest of the way to get an extra zone 2 time. I think a lot of people forget, and this is strictly with cycling, right? You wouldn't do this with running. I think running is the one where it's very, very case by case and please ask your coach basis, right? Like you don't want to add in intensity before a long run, but swimming's the same way. Like if you miss an endurance swim and let's say it's like something simple like 10 by 200s, and the next day is 25s or Wednesday, maybe like, well, I can't make up the swim, but maybe I can get a little bit more and I have more time today. Then what I would suggest is, bang out the intervals, the intensity stuff, and then add in endurance and, turn a 2,000, 2,500 swim into a 3,500. You might not get the exact volume, and that's not what it's about, right? It's about the stress that you're allocating to the week and that you're absorbing, in your body, because, one of the same reasons that we hate TSS and CTL and ATL is, if I said, go do a 2,000-yard swim in the morning and a 2,000-yard swim in the evening, well, those both would equal, like 20 points or 40-point total. It's not taking into account that you did them on the same day. And so you just have to really do that. But same thing with cycling, right? You get an interval session, you miss your zone 2, do the intervals early, and then just elongate your cool down. Or do vice versa, elongate your warm up. Most people would prefer to, I think, elongate their warm up because as soon as the main sets are like, yeah, I'm ready to get off the bike. I mean, I did that to myself yesterday. An hour and a half with what was scheduled to be, the last 30 minutes kind of all easy. I was like, don't know that I have the bandwidth for that today. I don't know that I have the bandwidth to stay on the bike and do 30 minutes easy after I've just done a bunch of like VO2 work. So I was like, you know what? Let me do an extra long warm up. And then that way my main set with like a 5-minute cool down will get me all the way to the end. It's kind of like, pushing the carrot out and the dessert to the very, very end versus like, you start off with the dessert and you're like, I don't really think I need a good meal. I think I'm set. So I feel like the longer you can push it out, but that's kind of my general rule of thumb. Zone 1, zone 2, again, it depends if it's 30 minutes, it depends if it's 3 hours. Like I had somebody yesterday ask me like, hey, I'm probably going to be gone all this weekend with a gymnastics tournament, and I got a 2-hour ride schedule. What do I do? And I just said, all right, well, I got you scheduled for, a ride today on a Monday, ride as long as you possibly can. Yeah. And they rode 2 hours, so they technically missed a 1-hour ride that I gave them, but they got in the main one from Saturday. And so I think, again, like just being flexible and doing your best to get things done is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. Because my thought was initially, is it a zone 2 4-hour ride, or is it a
that's right.
2-hour
run, or
then yeah, exactly. Then you got to figure out a way. I think that takes priority usually. But I like what you're saying. But I also say that, right when you said that about the making a longer warm up and a shorter cool down, I was like, man, but that cool down is the mental game. Mm-hmm. It's so hard, but I think that is one of those things that just sort of translates into shit. I got 20 miles left. I got to just kind of get through it. I think you can practice that mentally. And I think that's one opportunity, because it sucks. You want to get off, but
it's a
can't
point.
Get off.
It sucks. It really does suck. Like the long, like, God, but that's the same, right? It's like, that's the feeling of the last 20 miles of the bike. Like you want to be off, your arms are sore, your neck is sore, your legs are hurting. You're like, I still got to run a marathon. And all of a sudden, your super comfortable saddle goes from feeling like, gel to feeling like concrete. And you're like, just get me off this thing. So it does. I think it does take, and there's some huge physiological benefits, to elongate that, that zone 1, zone 2 work towards the end. But yeah, I mean, the main point is to get it done. But yeah, there is a lot to be said for finishing it off like that. So again, case by case basis, but make the best decision you can for that day. Natalie Rowe, thanks for doing this Q&A podcast. You always end up hitting questions I didn't think I needed to know, but I'm glad to have your insight. For all of us in cold weather climates where all of our training has been indoors for the last few months, we're all anxious to get outside, which pushes us to warm weather climates for early season races. Obviously, training inside is not the same as outside. We're not getting heat acclimation. We can't really open water swim, other than telling us we should just wait a little bit longer to get some time outside. What guidance would you give an athlete wanting to do an early race with no time outdoors leading up to an event? Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Yeah, you're behind the 8 ball a little bit. The only piece of advice, I mean, I think generally, there's no such thing as too cold of running weather. It's just too poor of a choice in wardrobe. So definitely get outside to run. I don't think there's any really excuse for that. You should be able to get outside and run unless you're living in like freaking Antarctica. Open water swim, there's not much to do with that. You gotta be really, really strong in the water. And if you absolutely cannot open water swim before, then do what's like a tradition, like a cardinal sin for me is like swim with your wetsuit in the pool. And I hate asking athletes to do that, one, because it's horrific for your wetsuit because most chlorine levels are like way too high and it deteriorates things. And then the other thing is just, it's so damn hot. I mean, it's hot just swimming in most pools on the regular, right? With your swim cap on. You throw a wetsuit on and it's next level. And there's 0 point in going to the pool with your wetsuit on and swimming for a 200. 0 point.
I agree.
Makes 0 sense. Right? I've always found it fascinating. Like, you go to a run shoe store and you're like, yeah, I think these shoes fit, right? These are it. You know what? Go outside and check them out. Not like go check them out for like 30 minutes. Take, 10 steps down the sidewalk. You're already convinced that the shoes you like, they're the color you want, the ones but you're never going to find, you're like, those 10 steps, money. And you go and you're like, no, you need more time. And the same thing with like a bike fit, right? Not all good fitters will tell you, hey, go ride this for a long period of time, right? Because everyone wants something to work that we believe will work. Getting to get a bike fit and you're like, oh, I feel so much better. Like you've been in that aero position for all of 90 seconds, right? Not 90 miles. So almost all good fitters like come back to me at no charge after you've ridden outside for a huge period of time. So make sure you do that. So if you're going to swim in a wetsuit inside, to me, that's what you need the most for open water experience is to how you're going to actually feel in your wetsuit. But get in at least 1,000. So hydrate a ton, get in there, get in at least 1,000. I'd rather do that than get to the race course. And, you're not going to do it all the day before. So you get in, you do like a 200-yard swim and you're like, I feel good. You're like, no, you have no idea what feels good or not. And then on the bike, to me, there's really only two solutions. One, get some of your easy riding during the week on a mountain bike or gravel bike or fat tire bike, just to get you doing something outside with some sort of bike handling. And the other one would be to maybe ride your trainer, like get some rollers for inside.
Yeah, that's all. The wetsuit inside one is a little tricky for me, but I guess that would be good. I don't know how far cold you are, but
it is last resort.
It's I'm in pretty cold weather, and running outside is it's just something you got to do. I think. I've been running in the single digits. You just got to dress for it and whatever. But the other thing I got to say about this, I haven't done it a ton, and it's definitely like, when I went from Nashville to New Orleans that year, that really bit me.
Mm.
But it was a major difference in climate that year or whatever. It was probably 30 degrees hotter than I ever trained in, but I was undertrained. So like one of my things with that is, just be prepared to go a little further too, like especially on the bike. I think the more the stronger your engine is, the better you'll be able to handle heat. And of course, I always do the sauna and stuff like that after a lot. So you just kind of get used to being hot, and it really makes a difference. I mean, I know I talk about cold plunging a lot, but what I've noticed is I don't get as cold outside either. And then you go in the sauna and you kind of get used to heat. And I just noticed that, I've been up here north of Madison all winter, and it's just really weird how it doesn't feel cold like it used to feel cold to me. Mm-hmm. So what I guess I'm getting at with that is, sometimes riding outside can get easier, and running too, because it just doesn't bother me as much. So, and when you're outside more, to me, that's more of a fresh air wind thing too.
Yep.
The first time you get out, if you just train inside the whole time, then go race somewhere warm and you haven't breathed fresh air and been out in the wind, you're in trouble.
Find a way. I mean, anything outside will do you good. And I think the thing is, though, a lot of people become so resistant to it. Like, the longer you stay away from it, the more resistant you're going to be to even doing it. The longer you go with running on the treadmill only or on the bike trainer only, the less likely you are to get outside. And then race day, you just expect to translate it perfectly. It just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Vanita, I love your podcast. I've been working on strength training with a trainer at a gym and gearing up to start full-on training for my first full in November. My trainer isn't aware of triathletes' specific needs, even suggests me only work on glutes and hamstrings in the gym for duration of my regular tri training. What can I tell him I need? I'm a 60-year-old grandma wanting to be strong for my race. All right. Benita, I got one piece of advice for you. Get a new trainer. Because no offense, but if the 60-year-old grandma is having to tell their trainer what they need, then you got the wrong trainer. It should be vice versa. And it doesn't matter if you're a triathlete or not. Like, we are not as special as we all like to think we are. We are not that special. You need to be balanced. And for a female of a certain age, you need your strength training. And so to suggest you only need hamstring and glute work, one, is going to cause you to have major imbalances and just totally forgetting about your quads, which are hugely important, especially in cycling, but also in stability. And also ignoring your lower back and your core. I mean, to me, I would tell them to focus on, everything from the neck down, be balanced. And honestly, at your age, it's about being strong and healthy, right? It's in Ironman racing, no matter your age, it's about not how fast you go, but how little you slow down. So if you can really strengthen and create a more durable chassis, right, then you're going to be in a much better spot. So yeah, I mean, for first step, fire your trainer. Find somebody else to get, because they don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, they tell them, it's probably somebody that's like, half your age, but yeah, they should know what they're talking about more than to suggest only glute and hamstring. They sound pretty lazy if you're asking me. That's my advice, Vanita.
Well, when I hear stuff like this, my first thought is always, I suggest finding a yoga class a couple times a week and then pull like some of your favorite mobility stuff out of there and do it like for 10, 15 minutes a day, and just do it that way, because it's an all body thing. It's all about balance. Like you said, it works if you're doing it right, it works most muscles in your body. For me, that's just the safest way to go. A lot of people talk about strength and, deadlifts or, just doing stuff like that. And I think, if you know how to incorporate that seamlessly into what you're doing in training, that's great. But for me, it's the body work stuff, and yoga just kind of covers the bases for me and keeps it simple.
I mean, I would argue that doing push-ups, air squats, lunges, and planks each day would be a significantly better program than what you're on right now.
Yeah, it's just something like that, man.
Total body, core, balance. I mean, it is all, it's functional and not just working on your glutes and your hamstrings. I mean, I'm not sure if they want you to it sounds like you're working out to be fitting in some of those like apple bottom jeans from back in the day. But that does not sound like what you really need. Next one from Kane. Hey, Rob and Mike, posting from Australia to say thanks for the podcast. My question: to what extent do you believe in fats for fuels versus when carbs are required for fuel. My coach is a big Dan Plews fan and all in on fats, but seems to be a tight line between fueling and bonking in a race.
Woo!
Yeah, that's right. Buckle up, sit back, and relax. No, I like Dan Plews. I don't necessarily know that his approach is right for everyone. And if you've listened to the way he talks, he doesn't either. I think it's very, very important for each athlete to demonstrate metabolic flexibility, which means you should be able to some extent, for certain durations at a specific intensity, be able to rely mostly on fat for fuel. Right. I've even got that with a lot of athletes focusing on metabolic efficiency right now. Like I have them picking, I tell them which ones are acceptable to either ride or run per week and do it in a more low carb restricted state, not a fasted state. They can eat before, but limit carbs. Like I think having that, right, that metabolic flexibility to burn a lot of fat is very crucial. I think everyone should be able to do that. You see way too many people become way too dependent on sugar for a 30-mile run. A 30-minute run. I got to run 30 minutes. Let me take a goo and a Cliff Bar and let me make my bottle of, straight sugar Gatorade. Like, no. Like, I'd argue you're being unhealthy. And you'd be better off not going for your 30-minute run versus downing all that sugar and creating all that inflammation. So I think, yes, I think it's important to do some kind. I do it for myself in my own training to do and work on being metabolically flexible. Having said that, part of that flexibility is also being able to tolerate and handle a certain amount and certain level of carbohydrates, because you do need it, right? And if you listen to Dan Plews talk, like he even says that, like, when these athletes race, they're taking in, a lot of them, plenty of carbohydrates. They don't even subscribe to the low carb, high fat. And there's also, if you read the literature, like the definition of low carb, high fat ranges from like as little as 25 or below carbs, which would be like, ketosis, all the way up to 150 carbs a day would still be considered lower carb, high fat, depending on how many calories you're taking in. That's a gigantic range. People hear low carb, high fat, and they hear keto, right? They hear bacon, sausage, steak for every meal, or, boatloads of cheese, right? I don't think that's what anybody, if you talk to a lot of coaches, they'll say that it's more about being metabolically flexible and being able to do certain things. So I try to do a lot of my runs fasted and teach my body to burn fat as fuel, because there's no denying that you will always, no matter what body fat percentage you have, no matter what body composition you have, you will always be able to burn. You always have more fuel on board in fat stores than you will ever be able to carry in glycogen and carbohydrates. Everyone on the planet Earth has more fat, no matter what size or shape they are, than they'll be able to take in from that. So I think it's important to be flexible, but also to be able to be a person that can take in 120 grams, 90 to 120 grams of carbs an hour when you need it. Because again, it's not about just using that one thing as fuel. To me, it's about always keeping your tank full. And I think that's where a lot of athletes get in trouble. They show and have zero metabolic flexibility. So they come out of the water and they've burnt all their biscuits and they're already burning through glycogen, and they've gone totally glycolytic in the first 30 minutes of the swim. At some point you're going to run out, and at some point you cannot catch up. So you're going to be running in a depleted state versus teaching your body to be flexible, right, and burning fat as much and as long as it can, and then sipping on carbohydrates. And again, in my opinion, and then keeping your stores topped off, right? So just a quick example is like, let's say you start off your Ironman with 1,500 calories stored in carbohydrates, but you swim zone 2 and you swim, and you're doing the first, 30, 40 miles of the bike, 50, 80 maybe even miles of the bike in zone 2, where you're all about fat oxidation. Well, you're still sipping on a drink that has carbohydrates in it, because you're still going to be burning through some, right? It's not just neglected. But then you get off the bike and your 1,500 calorie stores is only down to 1,400. you're set up for a so much better overrun than you would be if you start going through that. And by the time you get off the bike, you're at 100. That's why people bonk on the run a lot of times, because they've totally, and you just can't catch up, right? Especially like we talked about before, like if I told Mike to go consume, you know, X amount of calories per hour per mile for a 2 hour easy run, he could easily do it versus a 5K all out, right? It's just harder to consume calories in a run, and it's definitely harder to consume calories in a run than it is a ride. So I think there's definitely something to it. I'm definitely not all in on it, but I think being flexible in it is important. And there are a lot of easy ways that you can do that and at least figure out. Like I've had a lot of athletes just this week that I've been working on with metabolic flexibility. It's like, hey, they're like, I had no idea I could go out and do an hour and 10-minute run with just water and still feel really, 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 really good. It's, so again, like it's not about seeing how little you can take in, which I think is where a lot of people get trapped in that like stereotype, right? Is that there's zero and then there's enough and there's doing it right. And I think that's kind of the fine line you have to straddle in a topic like this.
You said something that I really think needs to be said again, and it was always keep your tank full. That key, I think all that fat burn, all that stuff works. I just think it's very difficult for people to nail, so it's kind of like, I was going to ask you a quick question and then I can continue, but when you went into treatment, recovery, like after years of drinking, how long did it take you for your body to feel kind of normal?
Oh,
years?
I mean,
months for sure. But
for sure. Even going 30 days sober, I still looked like a train wreck. I looked better, but I still looked, I'd say it probably took me at least a year. Going back and like looking at pictures, like you can tell in my eyes that I'm happier and I'm better, but man, like I think it took every bit of a year for me to like really feel like an overall like wellness, right? And health, that it was so much, because you do so much of that damage to your system, right? Chronic damage, right? Over and over and over and over again, every day for a long period of time. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a month, right? Because I think your body is just like, sometimes I think, and I don't have any proof of this, but like, I guess I feel and believe that like sometimes your body is resistant to change, even if you're trying to change, because it's anticipating the comeback, right? Of whatever it is that you've let go of, whether it's sugar or dairy or gluten or alcohol or drugs. Like I think it takes a while for it to like admit to itself that it's the stranglehold on whatever it has over you is actually gone for good.
Yeah. Your body is adapted to whatever it is, and then it's going to have to adapt to whatever it is again after 30 or 40 or 50 years of doing something one way. It's like you're saying, the going out for an hour run with just water. Like I do that sometimes, but it for lack of a better word, I feel like my tank gets depleted sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is, where in the past I might like drop 2 scoops of scratch in a bottle and run with a bottle for an hour. Now maybe I'll just do like a half scoop or something,
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about that shit all the time, when I'm maybe trying to cut back coffee or something, maybe a half cup here instead of going all in. Just like things like that, because, running with just water sometimes for me is, I think we need a little soda. It's mainly just a sodium thing that I'm trying to keep a little bit of a balance with. And, so that's how I look at it. I'm not good enough to be a straight up fat burner, but I work at it like you do. Sometimes I'll get on the trainer, same situation for an hour and pedal with like a half scoop of scratch in there, just easy or whatever, just to kind of do it. And I think over time it makes a big difference rather than just trying to go, cold turkey on something like that.
Yeah. Cold turkey never ends up going pretty well.
Unless you have like tremendous.
And that's why I think like, like and I'll tell athletes this, and anybody listening, like this is how you should do it. Like don't start with an hour, Like what I usually tell athletes is like for a riding is the easiest one to do, in my opinion, and is to do, for your hour ride, don't try for the first hour to go all with nothing but water. Like start out doing 30 minutes plain water, and then after 30 minutes, start taking in carbs. And then after 2 weeks, the next time try for 40 minutes, water only, and then adding in carbs. And this will make you up to 50 minutes, right? Don't go for an hour, because then, like you said, you totally nailed it. You start to joke, oh yeah, I think I'm just gonna go, no carbs. And you're like, what the hell? Like your body's revolting against you, and you feel terrible. So it never lasts. You can't see benefits because all you did was go cold turkey, right? And so you have to, same thing for running. Like don't try it for an hour to start. Try it for 30 minutes, right? Instead of like, for maybe someone like yourself, instead of doing an hour with a half scoop the first hour and a half scoop the second hour, maybe do 30 minutes with no scoops, and then the last 30 minutes take a whole scoop, to kind of get your body, used to not having any versus just having less, and it's still going to get in the same amount, especially towards the end when you're needing it the most. It's actually getting the biggest hit of carbs and sugar towards the end, which is when most people need it. And a lot of people need it for recovery as well. It's just, there's so many schools of thought on it. And again, I think that's, and going back to the very beginning of the podcast, it's definitely one of those areas where, figure out what works best for you. And it looks different for everybody. For me, I can't do it with riding, but I can go run for an hour and a half with nothing. But a riding, I feel like after 30 minutes, then I'm smoked. I'm like, I need some carbs, like right now. So trying to, don't try to be somebody you're not, but you can look for ways to make who you are more efficient.
Yeah, and I also think it depends on how you feel in that particular moment. We go back to round camp, not this last one, but the one before, and I think I mentioned it before, but we had the half marathon, or 5K, 10K, half marathon, then full marathon. For that half marathon, I really went out there. I just felt good. And we eat a lot there, and I knew I had a lot of fuel in me from the day before, the night before, and everything. I ran on like one scoop of scratch, the whole half marathon. And then the next day for the marathon, I ate like a pig, the whole thing. But I'm just saying, pick your spots too, because it was just one of those things where I just kind of wanted to see how it felt.
Yep.
And I felt really good through, most of it. I didn't feel like I was depleting myself, even though I was, obviously, but it was still training for that lower carb kind of fat burn situation. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, no, you said it perfectly. And before we move on to the next one, final question, I think like that ultimately you always have to remember, right? And I always talk to athletes in the same breath. It's very, very similar to like, heat training. The point is to finish the workout. So if you go and to get fitter, right? So if you're doing so much heat acclimation, you can't finish your workout, or you're having to go so slow with no intensity that you're not getting any fitter, then you're just becoming a heat adapted slow athlete. Same goes for, like you said, listening to how you feel. If you think you're supposed to get up and, I've had this problem myself before, and I've had to adjust. Like, if there's no late hockey practice, then I'll eat around 5:36, and I can usually get up the next morning and do like a long run, or not long run, but like, 55, 60 minutes of a run, wake up at 5, wake up at 6, and go out and feel fine, right? 12 hours, no food, just water. But if like tonight, there's hockey at 6, leave the house at 5, I'll probably go ahead and have dinner before that because I hate eating dinner late. So I'll eat dinner at like 4:30, 4:45. Well, to me, when I wake up that next day, I've done a plan. I have planned to do a fast run. I can tell when I wake up that I'm just running on empty. So in order to keep the spirit and the intent of the workout, I take in some carbs. I either take in some applesauce packets or a gel or some water, some sodium. But to me, the over, when you come like, triaging what's most important, to me, it's always getting the session done and feeling good enough to do another one. And so I do, that's such a great point, is like, you have to also understand, like, does it make sense to try this now or not? Because ultimately the goal is to get fitter and faster, right? Not to barely make it through 30 minutes and then you have to cut it short. So you miss 30 minutes of running and you're going to feel terrible. So again, like you you can't be so dogmatic in your approach that you're unwavering in, in being flexible with what needs to be done that day in that moment, given how you feel in your body.
Yeah. And I'll even say, if before you go into any of that kind of theory, look at your sleep. Because if you're not sleeping good, I don't think that stuff matters that much. I mean, because you can wake up refreshed and feel like you don't need anything, or you can wake up and feel like you need 8 cups of coffee and, a whole bottle of gels. And, like those types of things are what I like to pay attention to. Sometimes you can wake up and just know you got it.
In a great way to, we talked about this before the podcast, but a great way to speed up and start that fat oxidation is if you got like an hour running, you want to take in some carbs, start off with like a 10 to 15, 20-minute walk.
100%.
Get the body loose, wake up a little bit. Don't take in any carbs, right? Just maybe sip on water, but you're not running, right? So it should feel pretty easy. Like you're going to take your dog for a 30-minute walk. You're not going to take a bottle of Gatorade with you, hopefully. You're not going to take a goo, right? But what it does is it starts to get your metabolism going, right? It starts to start burning fat. And so it definitely helps in that switch. So I think it's a great point, and I can't recommend that enough. Walking in general, right? If you want to know why our nation's become so fat, it's because we sit so damn much.
Yep.
You got to get out and you got to walk, right? So I think starting off with a walk is super important and even critical when it comes to burning fat and kind of staying there, but it's still being able to nail your workout.
Yeah, and quit eating fake food. That's another one.
Dude, no kidding, right? Tyler Colson, how often should you upgrade your tri-bike? How many years of bike tech development does it take for there to be a meaningful leap in technology and speed? I'm currently still riding a Cervelo P2 from 2008 and trying to justify the cost of buying a newer bike. Thanks for all you do. Your podcast has changed my triathlon journey significantly. Thank you, Tyler. We appreciate hearing that. I mean, most triathletes will say you buy a new bike when motivation is low. So that's a general rule of thumb for most athletes. I mean, bikes are almost at like peak tech. I mean, it's going to be really, really hard to get any faster. Having said that, I don't think you need a brand new one. If you're riding a Cervelo P2 from 2008, yeah, if you could get like a Cervelo P3 from like the mid-teens to early, I don't know, even like, I mean, you're going to be at you're close. I mean, because really, like the frame's important, but I remember I had a Cervelo P3. This is like 2017, 18, and I switched out the handlebars and got a tri-rig front end, and it was about as fast as like the P5 back then. So there's a lot of things you can do to make your bike faster, but I mean, when you look at a leap in technology and speed, you also need to look in leap in cost. I mean, like the high-end bikes now are just asinine cost-wise. They're just unbelievable. Will they be faster than your 2008 P2? For sure. Does it matter? I don't know, because my big thing is I know you'll echo this, is if you're super comfortable on your bike and you can be an aero for forever, I would caution you on making that change. I mean, I have 2 athletes right now I'm thinking of just top of my head who bought brand new bikes in the 5-digit range and can't seem to get comfortable on them. Mm-hmm. So the faster bike, the better aerodynamic bike, the bike, yes, way faster. The person on it, which is all you should care about, probably slower. Because if you can't get comfortable on it, then you're not going to be an aero long enough for it to even matter. Because remember, the bike doesn't race, you do. It's you on the bike. Same reason, like we always talk about, like when athletes, hey, but that bike weighs so much. I'm like, you sit on top of it. Like, yeah. You sit on top of it. So worry more about what you're eating in the kitchen than in watts per kilo than your bike being 18.5 pounds versus 18.8. And I got to go with the carbon cage. You got to go with the lighter this. I'm like, dude, or shave off 5 pounds and be a better runner, be an athlete, be overall a healthier person.
Yeah, my stance on this. Yeah. That I do not agree with the old motivate me to ride more by buying a new bike. I think it should go the opposite. Once you're riding it a ton and you're you feel like you earned it, then maybe you can get a new bike. But I think that's a great point, though. It's like if you're comfortable on it and it still rides well, I mean, I don't know. You got like there's other ways to get faster.
For sure. Yeah. Last question, and I think I'll probably let you lead with this one. Thoughts on recovering from a tailspin in a swim? You're swimming along with a good pace, and then suddenly you can't catch your breath. You can't put your face in the water. You can't really swim freestyle like you've done hundreds of miles in the training. Do you go into backstroke, grab on the guy next to you, breaststroke a while, hang on to a buoy for a spell? I'm not talking about lack of training, but just getting ahead of yourself, and you're a few hundred yards in already. Personally, I get out of the way and roll into backstroke for a few yards and remind myself that what a dumbass I am. This kind of helps.
Yeah. I mean, just like the negative split mentality, that which is always set, the tone is set at the front, your first half, and the beginning of how you go out is what my thing is. I literally try to swim as slow as possible for the first 200 yards. Slow, this is ridiculous because I am always going faster than I think I am. So, but if I get into that position,
it's
which
like the first quarter mile of the run of the marathon,
100%,
right, coming off the bike.
I know, yeah. I used to get into the position you're talking about because I would go. It just it's easy to get trapped and caught up in the excitement and the speed of everybody around you going faster than they think they're going to. So when that has happened in the past, I've just been a breaststroker. Like if I feel like I'm even getting out of my my pace, even if I feel fine, sometimes I'll just drop into about 5 breaststrokes just to be like, all right, dude, slow it down because it's not going to end well if you can't, because I usually in Ironman, I'm really, really cautious through the first 200 or 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, all I think about is just finding a pace where I'm feeling comfortable, not stressed, and just like, I don't care how fast I'm going. Cause you're usually, if you're still, I just keep trying to move. And then when I get to that halfway point, then I'm like, okay, I feel good. I know I got it now. Cause a lot of people will say, I felt like shit for the first 500 in the workout. Same thing. You got to get your body to a place when you're swimming and bike, everything's like that. And we always, first mile is rough, and then I started. So, adhere to that. I mean, give that homage. It's like that shit happens all the time. So, if you didn't grow up swimming like which you can probably get in the water and always feel, or mostly always feel comfortable. A lot of us aren't that way. So I just think you have to respect that and understand, because we always forget that you're going to feel better. And it's almost impossible to believe. You think you're going to feel like crap the whole day, but then suddenly, slowly, I guess, it kind of unwinds, and then you start feeling better. And then you have your breath, you have your muscles working right, and then you can kind of up the effort a little bit.
Yeah, no, man, I have a hard time with this just because I've never experienced it. And, but, listening to you talk, and I'm sure this is not the first time anyone's ever thought of this, but, I would experiment with, and it sounds like you do this to an extent, like a lot of people talk about how beneficial, walk running is, and, walking the aid stations, keeping your heart rate down and making sure you're getting fluids. I think there'd be something to experiment with people who, for them personally, like if they feel like they struggle with this, because the thing about swimming is once you get hypoxic, it's game over.
Yeah.
Right. You can't stand still. You can't sit on a curb. You can't coast on your bike. You have to tread water at minimum in a sea of 3,000. Right. Like there is no stop. Right. You have to be doing something, and it's panic inducing. And so again, like once you get there, it's always just like pacing on the bike. Like, you can give limits to how high to go in watts, because once you start burning through lactic acid, then your body changes, its need changes, and how it consumes and absorbs different glycogen and carbohydrates. It all changes. So you just don't want to even go there, right? It's like, once you go in aerobic, it's hard to not go. You've already been there, so you can't say I'm not going again. Well, swimming is the epitome of that. Once you get to where you're out of breath, you can't not calm it down, right? Same, very, very similar. Also, like once you get, it's in hot races, it's never about cooling yourself off. It's about never getting hot enough, Because once you get too hot, the only way to cool off is to stop or to slow down to a crawl. Because you're always going to be dissipating heat and your core temp's always going to be there. And if you move, if you jog for 4 steps, it's going to go up. For swimming, I think people should look at, maybe swim, instead of doing, walk around the aid station, maybe it's swim and breaststroke the buoys.
Yeah.
Starting off that 200 yards, super easy. And then every buoy you get to, breaststroke 5-10 seconds, just to kind of keep yourself calm and to stay in control and to keep your breath calm. Maybe it's even not buoy to buoy. Maybe you can set your Garmin device, whatever watch you have on, maybe every 2 minutes it beeps, and that's your cue to take 5 breaststrokes, right? Just to stay calm. And obviously, if once you get through a cycle of 20 or 30 minutes, that maybe you feel good enough to where you can just ignore it. But like you said, especially in the beginning, people go way too fast. They're gassed. And once you're gassed, you're done. Right? It's like once your car overheats, the only thing you can do is pull over the side of the road and watch the fumes and the smoke come out of the hood. You're done. It won't go anymore. Same thing goes to the swim. Once you go too hard and you go anaerobic and you can't breathe, you cannot slow it down. Right? Or it's very, very, very hard. It takes a lot of skill, patience, and just being really, really comfortable in the water to do that. But for a lot of people, they're just not comfortable. So I would set a timer, maybe do every 20 strokes, right? Take a few breaststrokes, and do that for a certain period of time. I think that would probably alleviate a lot of panic and having to make it the whole way without breaststroking. It'd keep your heart rate lower, and it would kind of give you, in my opinion, very attainable segments of distance to cover, and then you stop. And then you start over. So I have no idea if that'll work or not, but listening to you talk, I was like, man, I can't help but think that might be a little bit, as you would say, I don't know, there might be something there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it also gives me a little bit of spatial recognition too. Sometimes if you just swim, you sort of lose, at least occasionally I'll lose my bearings, but if I can kind of like look at the course for a few strokes and then I'll just get back and I'll be like, all right, I'm on track, It's good.
I like that. Swim breaststroke. You can invent that.
Oh yeah.
Who's the guy?
Wow.
Who's the Galloway method? You could call it the Mike Torelli method.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, making millions.
I think Emily told me, she's a really good swimmer. I think she does that occasionally just to loosen her body up,
And you nailed it. It does. Like I do it. Like if I feel like I can't see or sight, I don't just swim into the abyss. Like I take breaststrokes, or I've stopped dead in the water before to get my bearings.
Yeah.
I'm like, because depending on now with like the whole rolling start, whenever you get in, it's, and depending on where I'm in, like Ohio, like you were swimming into like the surface of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
The buoys were yellow. The sun was yellowish orange. And then for whatever reason, every kayak they had was yellow. It was like the armada of yellow kayaks. And you're like, I don't even know what the hell is a buoy. And I remember twice I just stopped dead in my tracks because I could not see where to go next. And for me, I would rather go straight and take a little bit longer to make sure I'm going straight than to work harder to go in the wrong direction to then have to work harder to overcorrect to go back and cover more yards in the other. And so I think that's a great point. Like just stopping and breaststroking to get your bearings, loosen things up, break things down a little bit is a great thing to probably practice.
Yeah, I like it.
Let's roll. We can invent that. The C26 swim float method. Swim tread, swim breast. I'm going to go over very well. Swim back, whatever. Just do whatever works for it. But I play with it, honestly. And another thing I'll do, and we'll end it, is, I would highly suggest practicing in the pool and encouraging yourself to panic. And most athletes will never do this, but I would highly suggest, like, the closer you get to race day, maybe dropping in a set of two, if you're doing 70.3, maybe 10 300s on 30 seconds rest. First 100, all out. Just gas it like you probably are in the race, whether you like it or not. And then the next 50, maybe do half breast, half free to get your breath under control. And then finish off the last, whatever that is, 150, easy swimming. Because I think people think, it's one thing to think and visualize that how to triage, how to fix whatever it is that you're the panic and do it. But the greatest practice for all things is real life. And so if you can do that and put yourselves in that situation in the pool, or in a controlled environment where you can stand if you need to, then the more you do it, the more personal history you have to kind of go back through your archives of overcoming it and knowing you can. Because I think that's the big thing for athletes, is like knowing you can because you've done it before, and then figuring out different ways and going back into certain experiences and be like, hey, I made it through that one, I can do it this time. Or this is what I did back then. This is what I said, right? This is my mantra. This is my whatever. This is what I'm going to do for this one. So I think the more you can practice stuff like that, the better off you're going to be in a race, no matter your comfort level.
It's good. And remember to exhale.
Make noise.
Make noise under the water.
Yeah, sound like a freaking hippo.
Well, they do it. They know what they're doing.
That's true. They do know what they're doing. They're vicious creatures too. That's it. That's all we got today. We have nailed. That's the first time we made it through all questions. So thank you again to everybody for posting those in. It's always fun to do. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast, the longer you do this, the more questions you have and the less you know. And I'm reminded that every time we do this podcast, these kind of Q&As, because it's always a question I never thought existed, but one we have the answer to, or one that we have to think through. So I think, and again, I think that's why the sport is so fantastic and people gravitate towards it, is because it's not 100% ever solvable. You're always kind of like challenged in a way, whether it be physically, mentally, or emotionally, to get better. And I think that's what draws us to the sport, is to give us those experiences and be able to overcome those. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and there's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he is available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. I'm available at Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man.
All right, dude. I'll check you later.
See ya.